Everyone is called to do something, but there is a specific purpose that the good Lord would want you to take. One of the things that may have helped me in making that decision to becoming a pastor is because of my dad, because I grew up as a pastor's kid. The end goal, Norbert, for what you have in life, the skills that you have learned, fits into the desire to really serve. Believe in the one.
Yes.
Believe the call. Believe in the one who calls you.
Yeah, that's very important. When the boat is rocked in the very stormy night, the one who can command the storm and who can calm.
That's right. That's right. He's the provider. He's the giver. He's the one who calls. He's the author of everything. He is. God is. And so you got to believe that the call comes from God.
Hi, Masterpiece Makers. Welcome to another episode of the Making a Masterpiece podcast. Man, I can tell you that this is one of the most anticipated episodes that I have ever wanted to do. And just to give you a context, guys, I am talking to a good friend of mine and a spiritual mentor, a pastor who's been pastoring for more than 30 years. We're going to talk about something very relevant nowadays on the topic of calling and purpose. Please welcome to the show Reverend Haniel Taganas. And I fondly call him Pastor Han. Pastor Han, welcome to our show.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Norbert. Thank you for this wonderful opportunity for me to be able to join you in your show.
It's also our honor, Pastor Han. And well, we just go directly into our topic because a lot of our listeners who are joining us from all over the world have this recurring issue. And I know it's maybe something that we Christians deal with every day, but not really speak of that much. And I know because I've also been through these questions myself a few years back, and it was you actually who helped me through these questions. And questions like, am I really called to do this? Or is it really my purpose? Or what is my purpose? So I'd love for you to help us unpack these questions. And to kick us off, Pastor Haniel, my first question would be a little bit personal because, as I've said in the intro, you've been pastoring for the last 32 years. And I have known you for the last 17 years of that 32 years. So can you take us back a little bit 30 years ago? What made you decide to become a pastor? Why are you a pastor?
One of the things that may have helped me in making that decision to becoming a pastor is because of my dad. Because I grew up as a pastor's kid, and his being a pastor has surely influenced my decision to become one. At one time, I went to tell my dad that I wanted to become a pastor like him, and that was when I was 4 years old. Obviously, when we were kids, to ask them, what do you want to become when you grow up? And sometimes you have, most often than not, you would always answer, well, I want to become this and that. And when they asked me, I said, I wanted to become a pastor like my dad. And it was also during the time when my dad shifted from being an architect to becoming a pastor. And I grew up from that 4-year-old and above already as him doing a pastoral work. But the decision to become one, which I could vividly recall, was when I was 9 or so, when a pastor was murdered, shot. And I said, Dad, I would like to take the place of Pastor Ibalarosa. The family name is Ibalarosa. So I was saying that I want to become a pastor and I want to take his place. So that I could still remember. And the 4-year-old thing, I totally forgot about it. But that was the decision that I made. And since then, I already had in my heart and in my mind that I really would like to become a pastor. So I didn't even think of any course at all, never thought of any option, but I just really wanted to become one. So that's it.
Okay, you just like dropped a bomb there. Like you said, you just mentioned that at the age of 9, your pastor was murdered, and then you wanted to replace him at that age. But then, Pastor Haniel, that's very young. It's not just fascinating, but it's really something that must have stirred you to be more convicted about that. And how come?
It is, but as I had to really single out that decision because somehow it has also shaped my strong resolve that I really would want to become a pastor. As a matter of fact, it only dawned on me after seminary years that I understood what it really means to follow Jesus, because think about it. He wanted, referring to that pastor, he wanted to become a pastor and then he became one. And that decision brought him, in fact, to him being murdered. It brought a strong voice, a strong calling, because to think of it, am I supposed to like respond to this kind of call which would cost me my dear life? Because I grew up, I told you my dad was once an architect. And when he decided to become a pastor, although it was difficult on the part of the family because imagine he was in a well-paying job, if I may say so, and he took the assignment, first pastoral assignment in a remote place, and he was receiving for compensation very very low. In fact, my grandfather really couldn't understand why he had to leave his profession. And in fact, at the time, my mom also decided to do the same. Like she also left behind her teaching profession because she wanted to become a pastor's wife. So they went off with 4 kids over there at the time. And when they made a decision, it was an unpopular decision, but he was well loved. Okay. It was in a remote area. And so I grew up in that kind of atmosphere, being loved, being taken care of. You're put it up on the stall, okay, so to speak. Later did I know the weight of the call, the burden that you have to bear. Only during that time, as I've said, when we were commissioned to go out to become a like intern, because I quoted actually during the commissioning rite, I said one of the reasons of this decision is because I wanted to take the place of that pastor who was murdered. And then I started to really reflect on it and said, wow, this is the call that I'm going to respond to. That it may result to my dear, that it may cost my life. And that also brings home to really the call of Jesus for me, for us to follow him. Because when we would seriously put into our hearts the call, we remember that when Jesus calls us, he calls us to follow him. And we are supposed to follow him not only to Jerusalem, to the triumphant entry, but to carry a cross. That gives so much value into the call that I am responding to. And I said, okay, so that when I was ordained into the ministry, when we had to lay prostrate before God, we're now saying, I'm now crucified with Christ. I'm no longer live the life that I am now living, but it is Christ living in me. So that is the call that we're actually responding to. We're totally leaving behind everything and giving your life to him. It's not all about me anymore. It's not all about gaining. It's not all about even acquiring the possessions and even the positions that you desire for in life. But it's actually
Wow,
totally just giving up.
that's amazing. It's very inspiring. And a lot of our listeners who do not know you and a lot of our masterpiece makers who are in different spheres and industries right now will probably say that's in respect to the story, that's just really amazing. But I think because not everybody is serving in a capacity in ministry like you, they'll probably say, oh, that's easy because you kind of knew already from the very beginning. But I know a lot of our listeners are really confused on what path to take. So, Pastor, my other question would be, can you break down the difference or the similarities of what is a calling and what is the purpose? Because you mentioned it in your answer earlier that you were called into this and then you served this purpose. So quickly, can you break us down the difference or the similarities of what is a calling and what is a purpose?
Okay, everyone is called to do something, but there is a specific purpose that the good Lord would want you to take. And that is what you really have to discover. What is really my purpose? Why am I here? What am I supposed to be doing in life? In my case, I'm being called for a specific purpose to become a pastor. Okay. I have actually some ABCDs of discovering it. I may start from the end. The end goal is really for you to ask yourself, is this really where I am? Because the place where you should be should always lead you to serving others, taking care of others, to becoming a person who can touch other people's lives, okay? To becoming a person who can really serve the lost, the least, and the last, okay, if I may say. Because if you remember, Jesus Christ, at the very end, would always ask you, I was hungry and you fed me. I was naked and you clothed me. I was thirsty and you give me something to drink. And then you ask, Lord, when did we ever see you naked and clothe you? When did we ever see you hungry and fed you? And then he said, well, if you have done this to the least, you're doing that to me. He said this during the end time, okay, at the judgment day. He's not going to ask you, what have you achieved in life? How much money do you have in your bank account? That is not what matters at the end of all this. He wouldn't ask you how many buildings you have built. It's not the way it is. So you've got to see where our good Lord really wants us to go. And so you should be able to ask yourself. In fact, if I may take a segue, I was once a chaplain of a university, right? And it is in that university and you get to interact with students who are making decisions in life. And perhaps the reason why they're taking, for example, nursing is because they wanted to become a nurse. But I would always ask them, if this decision of yours of becoming a nurse really brings you to serving others, because I don't care. In fact, some of you perhaps are taking this course because you wanted to go abroad. Because speaking from the Filipino side, from the Philippines, if you're a nurse in the Philippine context, you can earn as much better when you work in some other places, like in the United States, for example. So I always told them, if it is your desire to really become a nurse, then so be it. But if you go there and if you want to just simply earn dollars, I would rather encourage you to shift either your course or shift your mindset or your heart. I don't care if you go to the United States, but go there, be a nurse, and take care of the patients. Take care of the least, and these are the patients who would be needing you, rather than go there and earn $4. Because I'd like to tell you ahead, I told them that even if you be earning so much, you would not be happy at all. Because at the end of all this, we are called to serve. And you should be able to distinguish that, because if you're a business student, for example, okay, you do business, go ahead. I mean, get rich, get all the wealth in the world. But I tell you, if you're doing that only for yourself, you will never be happy at all. Earn for something. The sky's the limit. But what is that for? Is that only for yourself? Or is it for others? That is the reason why, in fact, Norbert, if you remember the time when Peter was given an opportunity to get a great catch after a long night of toil and they didn't get anything at all, diba? And so when the good Lord says, okay, Peter, do you really love me more than this? Perhaps he was referring to the success that he had. Like, imagine all the catch, the fish that he had. But at the end of all, Jesus Christ said, if you do love me, then express your love by taking care of the sheep. If you do love me, take care of my lambs, take care of the sheep, feed my lambs. And that is what we're called for. So that is why I would always say, okay, if there is any purpose at all, then see to it that all this would lead you to serving the least, serving others, touching other people's lives, which would later, and may probably I'll share with you the steps that I would usually follow. I'm asked, Pastor, is this really where God wants me to be? I would start from the end, okay? From the very end. I call it the letter D for my ABCD.
See, this is the nature of the Lord, right? Always counterculture, because when you said you have to shift your mindset and you think about the idea that is the place where you are actually serving people. What can you say to people who feel stuck in a certain job or a certain path that they took and they don't feel like they could move forward? And maybe there is a missed calling, or maybe they don't know their purpose. And if they find themselves in that situation, what could they do?
Okay. If the things that they're doing, they're happy about it, if they're satisfied with what they're doing, let's say if what they're doing has put a lot of meaning into it, like if they're happy with it, they would always do it, right? I mean, people would always love to do things if they really like what they're doing. In fact, there are people who may not be receiving so much in life, but if they love what they're doing, they would stick to that work, to that job, to that profession. For example, for those people who love teaching, you may not be able to get so much from your teaching career than compared to the ones who's doing like business, okay? Like you would spend 8 hours with your teaching career, and here's one business person who's doing just 3 hours a day, and yet he's getting that much. The success may not be measured by how much you receive for a compensation, but how you can see your students progressing from what you have learned to becoming the kind of persons they wanted to become. So these are among the things that you are to consider with where you are right now. It is always the question on, am I really fulfilling the purpose of becoming a blessing to others, of touching other people's lives? Because at the end of all this, what is most satisfying really and fulfilling is that you're being able to put a smile on the face of other people, right? Because in so doing, you're actually also putting smile to your face. It's fulfilling, right? That is the fulfillment anyone would be able to receive when you're able to make other people happy about what you're doing. Because I'd like to believe that is the main purpose why we are here on earth, right? We are just like trees planted, okay? And when we bear fruit, we're supposed to bear fruit. And the fruit that we bear is for others. We're not like trees planted to eat our own fruit. Let's talk about becoming a doctor or becoming a nurse. If you go to your patient, the patient wouldn't be interested how many, if you're a doctor who graduated from Harvard or from whichever, they would ask you, the patient wouldn't even ask you, dare to ask you as to how much you get from, I mean, about your grade in your board exams. I mean, he wouldn't ask, are you a board passer? He wouldn't even ask if you're a nurse who's a graduate of this university. No, the patient would just be interested to know that somebody is taking care of her or somebody loves the patient. At the end of all this, like, it wouldn't even matter if I was pastor for 52 years. If I'm going to make a mess with my sermon perhaps delivered today, I mean, they wouldn't care if you have these credentials. They just wanted to hear what you're saying, and if I'm touched with what you're telling me right now. That's what they needed.
That's amazing, and that's very liberating to hear. That at the end, it's really how we love and how we serve others, and that should be the main purpose of what we are seeking. Now, Pastor, let's go to your ABCD, because I think we would love to hear whether in this conversation, how do we actually figure out this whole calling and purpose thing? Years ago, I started a personal journey to help provide professional creative communication solutions to brands born out of faith and big dreams, but running on limited resources. Before finding my true calling in ministry, I was an advertising professional, and I always felt frustrated whenever a great idea, product, service, or community initiative didn't take off simply because branding wasn't a priority. I've seen too many faith-oriented entrepreneurs and nonprofit leaders make this mistake because they don't have access to professional creative services, or they are put off by the high cost and consumerist approach. I decided to use my experiences in mainstream advertising and in ministry to bridge the gap. The result is a 6-module branding course that can help transform brands, effectively tell their stories, reach their audience, and help them achieve their goals. Teaching this to business owners and leaders, I've seen it transform confusing concepts into real brands that cut through the noise and make real everyday impact. I believe that brands can be a blessing to the world, solving problems and easing burdens, fueled by passion and driven by purpose. That is what we aim to do with Masterpiece Kingdom Brands. If this resonates with you and you're ready to uncover your kingdom brand, let's connect. Sign up for the Masterpiece Kingdom brand building course today.
So I have the A, B, C actually, and the D is the main goal. And the D is the desire to serve. It is your desire to serve. And I have two D's actually, and two A's, two A's, two B's, two D, two C's. Okay. The end goal, Norbert, is for what you have in life, the skills that you have earned, that you have learned, fits into the desire to really serve. Okay. So my A's would be affirmation and acknowledgement. You affirm of the need and you acknowledge the call. Okay. I can be very biased in this from my profession being a pastor. Okay. For instance, when Jesus Christ talks about the need of the people to take care of the harvest, he said, the harvest is plenteous, but the workers are few. You remember that passage of the scripture, Luke 10:2. The harvest is plenteous, but the workers are few. So you've got to affirm the need, that there is indeed a need. For instance, you affirm the need for health caregivers, for example, and you've got to acknowledge that you're called for it. Okay? In your case, you found the need, you affirm that there's a need for what you're doing right now.
I found the need to bridge kingdom work with
That's right.
entrepreneurship and how to really express that in the kingdom way.
Precisely. So you affirm the need first. Like for the teaching career, you found the need. You have to affirm that there's a need for the kids to be able to learn. Okay? And you acknowledge that God calls you to do it, to respond to the need. Okay? So if there's a need, if you found a need for the government to run by a certain person who can do it, then affirm that need and acknowledge that God calls you to become probably a politician to respond to that need. So you prepare yourself to become one, okay? So whether you are, as I've said, whether you're a doctor, a nurse, even a janitor, if you affirm the need for somebody to clean the dishes, if you found a need to become a mother, then you embrace that role of motherhood, but you've got to affirm that need, that there's a need for a mother, okay, or a need for a family. And after that, you acknowledge that you can be that person who can build a family, okay, who can be a father to a child or to children, who can be a husband, who can be a wife to a spouse, okay? So that's letter A. Remembering what Jesus Christ, the harvest is plenteous. Okay, there's a plenty of harvest, but he said the workers are few. And then he said, pray to the Lord of the harvest that he will send more workers into his harvest field. Every time I quoted a verse, I would always say, okay, you pray to the Lord of the harvest, but perhaps you may be the answer to the prayer. So you can acknowledge that, okay, I acknowledge that I can be part of that prayer, or I can be an answer to that prayer. My B would be to believe. Believe and bear. Believe in the one who calls you. Believe in the one who challenged you. Believe in the one who inspires you to do it. And in the Christian perspective, in the Christian world, believe that Jesus Christ calls you. Believe that Jesus Christ calls you to that or for that purpose. I said bear because there are challenges to bear. You have to bear the burden. You have to bear the challenges. You have to endure the weight of that calling. It's not easy at all. You have to, even for students, for example, you have to bear the consequences of your embracing that call. You have to bear the burdens of studying and of preparing yourself, and even bear the challenges ahead after your studies. Okay? The burden that goes along with the profession, the course that you are taking right now, or bear the burden of becoming a business person. The only trouble with that's the reason why I would like to use the word bear, because we sometimes think that responding to the affirming and acknowledging the call would always lead us to just simply taking easy steps towards becoming one. And then my C would be conviction and confirmation. Conviction. You have to have strong and firm belief that you are called and you are to respond to that call. You must have the conviction because your conviction would help you propel in responding to the call. I remember when Jesus Christ called the first disciples, for example, he said, "Come, follow me, and I will make you fishers of men." Those first few disciples who responded to the call had this conviction so much so that they were willing to leave everything. Remember Peter and John, the two sets of brothers, Peter, James, John, they left everything and they followed Jesus. If you have the conviction to becoming a nurse, if you're the conviction to becoming a lawyer, then that will help you make a strong result to respond to it. My other C would be confirmation. This is very important. And the confirmation should be coming from your friends, from your close members of the family. I always found myself being asked by parishioners. And I guess you remember that time when you asked me if I would agree to your decision
Yes.
to leave
So, yeah.
Bradford.
Yeah. I mean, let me just hop in on that. I know in our previous episodes, I have our masterpiece makers who've been following our show probably heard me speak about this before. And guys, I just want to quickly share that story because in 2015, this is the year when I decided to leave the Philippines and go to South Africa. Haniel was my pastor back then. It was a very hard decision for me to do, but I didn't think much about it until the night before I had to leave. I remember very well that I called you and then I asked you, why did you even allow me to do this? Because at that time I was anxious because I was about to take a step that I never even knew. But then you told me, like, Norbert, if I told you it was going to be this hard, you will never do it. And it hit me very hard. And I was like, wow, like this is crazy. But again, it will still remain one of the highlights of my life because you really challenged me. But again, if also in a way what you're saying now, if there was no confirmation, then there would have been no peace. And yeah, and that's why I feel like the confirmation is very important because this is something that you don't see yourself. It's something it has to come from God. It has to come from wise counsel. It has to come from the Holy Spirit. So yeah, you
Agree.
can tell me what
I
else you
agree.
want to share about that.
Your conviction must go hand in hand with the confirmation from your friends, from your loved ones, especially from those close to your heart, those who know you really. If you happen to be a spouse, then you have to ask confirmation from what can you say about this decision, for example. You have to ask, getting, for example, married, becoming one, you have to get confirmation from the closest. Should I say yes to this? Of course, you're not going to let them live with you, for example, especially from your parents. You need confirmation from them. You need their blessings. You need their wise counsel. And you can find it very comforting to know that the decisions that you've made has a confirmation from no less than the ones who loved you and who knows their good intention for you. I'll give you an example in my decisions, for example, to respond to a certain call, because in our context, pastors of the United Church of Christ, we only serve for certain term. One time I received a call to serve as chaplain in the university, and side by side with a call to serve as pastor in the United States. The call was inviting, and there was a need. There was a need, and I affirmed the need. I acknowledged that God could also call me to serve in the United States. I strongly believe that when God calls me, I can go there. I had to ask Catherine, my wife. I told her, Catherine, I received a call from the United States, and because the pastor really wanted me to take his place, he's retiring. And then Catherine just simply said, okay. She said, this confirms our call that we are to respond not because of what we can get, but what we can give. And at the time, it seems that the call that was offered from the United States would lead us to a much comfortable life, if I may say. Of course, needless to say. But at the time, the call was to really serve the students. So Catherine was just trying to say, I'd like to confirm your call. And maybe the good Lord was just trying to help you make that decision whether you really want to serve or you want to enhance. I mean, you go there because you wanted to get a big. Unfortunately, though, at the time when the call was made from the United States, there was together with it the offer. If you go there, this is the offer. That is why, Norbert, Catherine and I would always remind ourselves that whenever we respond to a certain call, we would always say, let's not talk about how much we can get. Let's not talk about how the assignment can provide us with what we need, whether there's a house to stay, whether there is something to do that. We don't talk about it. We don't even consider it in anything at all. That is how we operate things, because we would rather want to think of how much we can provide, how much we can give in terms of becoming a pastor to others. The point is, confirmation is really very important. And I'm referring to confirmation from others, which of course includes, among others, and in fact, which is most important, the confirmation from the Holy Spirit. You have to really pray and ask. That is why there is discernment. You may have, Norbert, you may have the desire to serve, because that is the end part, right? The end goal. You can always do service, but is it really where God wants you to serve? I'm not saying that there's no possibility at all for me to work in the US or in places where I can get more in terms of how much I can get, because even in my assignments right now, I'm assigned to big churches, for example, and people would always say, so you're serving a big church. These are old and big churches in the Philippines. But I told them, no, I'm not pastoring only for big churches. In fact, before this big church that I'm assigned, I was assigned to a very remote place, 6 hours away from the city, to the mountains. I went there. I was assigned there. I had to take care of people there. Somebody was telling me, are you going there? You've been pastoring big churches, and why are you serving this very small congregation? Where are you going to stay? And there's no place there. They can get anything from you. And then Catherine and I decided, no, we're serving there. We're going to work. We're going to find work, odd jobs, so that we can go there. We can do mission work there. God calls me. That is our discernment that we are going to respond, especially during the pandemic time. And if I would tell you, Norbert, you know what happened? Pastors stayed in parsonages, right? And because I was serving a huge church, we had a huge parsonage. But if I'm going to tell you right now, just to let you know, when we served at that time a very small church in the mountains, 6 hours away from the city, no parsonage, okay, no place to stay. But you know what? The Lord has provided us with much bigger house to stay, rent-free in the city, much bigger than the parsonage that we had when we were assigned in a huge church. You can only get it because you discern the call, okay? It's not because you wanted to get something, but it's because you just wanted to serve. And the Lord will just provide you with the joy of serving, whether or not there is a place that you can stay. Because after all, if, like in my case, because we're responding to the call to serve as pastors, let us all remember, but when I'm addressing this to those people who are serving in the church or serving as missionaries, for example. Remember when Jesus Christ calls people to follow him, at one time he said, foxes have holes, birds have nests, but the Son of Man has no place to lay down his head. So always remember that when you are in a church setting or as missionary, you have to remember that the call, as I've said, is for us to follow Jesus, not only to Jerusalem, but also to Calvary.
Wow.
So that's it.
Thank you so much, Pastor Haniel. That's very profound. Thank you for sharing. It's so good to hear you. I was just like taking it all in. And I just want to give a quick recap for our listeners that you just have to affirm and acknowledge the call.
Yeah.
That we believe that Jesus called us.
Believe in the one.
Yes.
Not just believe the call, believe in the one who calls you.
Yeah, that's very important. When the boat is rocked in the very stormy night, the one who can command the storm and who can calm.
That's right. He's the provider. He's the giver. He's the one who calls. He's the author of everything. He is. God is. And so you got to believe that the call comes from God.
Oh, that's so good. And then we bear the weight of the calling as well. Yeah. And then you have to have the conviction. And that conviction has to come with a confirmation. And that confirmation should lead us to desire to serve and it to eventually give us the right discernment to make the right decision and the right move.
I hope the steps help.
Oh, wow. I'm pretty sure a lot of our Master Fee speakers right now are taking down notes. And guys, you can always pause, go back and listen to that because this is God's word that we're talking about. And I know in our show, we really want to help you build your faith. And this is exactly what we're doing. Oh, I could talk to you so much, Pastor Haniel, and I could listen to you all day long, but we have to wrap up our episode. So if our masterpiece makers are listening all over the world, how can they connect with you? And where can they hear you on a Sunday? Can you please invite our listeners?
Yeah, you can actually listen to some of the tidbits and pieces of my reflections. I have a Facebook page, Haniel Taganas. I am currently serving as pastor of one of the churches here in the Philippines, in Mindanao, southern part of the country. And the church is United Church of Christ in the Philippines, Cagayan de Oro. You can join us. We have online worship services. We provide Cebuano and English worship. We have the traditional and contemporary worship services that you can tune in. We have a YouTube channel, UCCP Cagayan de Oro, and also Facebook channel.
Yeah, so we're going to put all of those details right into our show notes, and you can check them out. And again, Pastor Haniel, thank you very, very much for this huge honor that we get to talk to you. I'm personally very thankful for all the moments that we shared, and I don't take that for granted. And I'm really thankful for Jesus that our paths crossed. And we wish you well. Thank you so much for joining us today.